In March, I was an expert speaker and my subject was WoundTalking. Prior to that, I was interviewed by Debbie Debonaire about my journey and how I got to do what I do. And so we spoke about a lot of things. Divorcing emotionally, which is one of my biggest passions because it gives you the power and the courage to divorce, not allowing your wounds to run that divorce process. How the inner child work that I did helped me create some of the things that I do now to help people reparent themselves, because that's huge. And my work with past life healing, ancestral trauma, and this life healing. Welcome to the Mindfuckery podcast, which is FeedSpot's fifth must listen to podcast on emotional abuse. I'm your host, Elizabeth, and in here we explore areas others are feared to tread. Through my own personal journey, I know how much this hurts and how confusing life becomes. So many questions, no closure, and no real answers. I've been a woundologist for over 20 years. I'm the unintentional author of Finding Lily, the A to Z of emotional abuse and divorce matters. I help you clear past life wounds, ancestral trauma, and this life wounding. And as the founder of the Inner Healing Sanctuary, I've created WoundTalking, the original wound, and Quantum Glow. I'm on a mission to help educate as many people as I can on the effects of trauma on our lives and our children's lives, and healing the wounds of our mothers and our fathers. It stops here, it stops now, it stops with us. So welcome along for the journey of a lifetime.
Hi everyone, I'm Debbie Debonaire and I am delighted to be speaking with Elizabeth Goddard today. So Elizabeth, it's great to meet you and to find out more about what you do and how you serve people. So please, could you take the floor and introduce yourself and share with us what you do?
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, I am a woundologist and I work with emotional wounds. I have been, the timeline I put on it is about 22 years. Obviously, I've been doing it longer, but I work with 22 years because I was on a past life energetics course and I learned some techniques that I now use today with the healing that I do. I work with this life wounding. I work with past life wounding and ancestral trauma that gets carried through. And it really, my passion is wounds and trauma.
That sounds really exciting. To be quite specific on what you work with. So can you give us kind of a little bit of an insight into how you would take someone through exploring their wounds?
Yeah. So it would be, I work with a lot of people that are recovering from emotional abuse. It was something that I experienced, my journey through that and the discoveries that I made. It started back in 2016, and I was sat on a beach in Greece and I knew that my world was about to implode, and I was desperately hanging on like one does with their fingernails going down a blackboard, to something that was completely unhealthy, and I knew it, but I didn't know what was going to happen next. And that fear and the abuse that happens in relationships with trauma bonding and all of that emotional abuse that that goes on, you stay. You don't know, you're trapped in this vortex and you have no way of escaping. So yeah, that's how it started. The story fell out of me. What I realized what I've become to realize is, and that's through some events that have happened quite recently actually, that the story as it happened was from 26 years ago. It was actually telling me what was happening in my life at that moment, but I didn't get it. So I wrote the story out, I did healing around it, and then the inevitable happened. When I got home, I was out there for 5 weeks. I got back and everything crumbled. It was built on really weak foundations. It all crumbled. And as I was starting to do the healing from that relationship, I came across this language that was new to me. And I've been a spiritual life coach for, I can't remember, I suppose at that point 6 or 7 years, and I'd been in that field for quite a long time. But there was all these different words and terms that I didn't know. And so as I was healing, I started to put together, I built a YouTube channel, and I was putting material out. And so I did the A to Z of the terms that I heard at that point. And the publisher of my book, because I'd had it published, he said to me, I hope this is your next book. So I then went on and published the A to Z of emotional abuse. So it's the dictionary of the terms and phrases. And at this point, I was going through the divorce, and I realized, wow, manipulation continues. And every time I speak to somebody from the legal profession, they look, they just look embarrassed and shameful that this happens. But the emotional abuse is carried out again through them. So while I was waiting for my book to be published, edited and published, I started to write a third book. This one was actually going to be called this one was going to be called 3 Things You Should Never Do Divorcing a Narcissist. But it sort of got stuck 3/4 of the way through. And then about a year later, there was some other stuff that happened, and another video I recorded, it combined and came together, and it's now called Divorce Matters. So it's a practical workbook to help people through that process, to help them not divorce with their wound, because that's really important for the wound not to be forcing that divorce through. And but also lots and lots of healing modalities and ways of helping yourself. And divorcing emotionally has been my passion. So if you divorce emotionally, you've got the courage and the power to divorce. And also it gives you permission, or people permission, to ask the questions and ask for the information that you've been told not to ask. And that's a big thing. We don't need to do it through the legal team. Don't need to be doing this. And it's that you get ambushed. And when you're in that state, it's painful, and you believe, because you've been trained to believe everything they say is the truth. So that is, in a nutshell, how with wounds. So what I would do is I would take somebody on a journey where it hurts in the body, and I take them, depending on what I'm doing. I like to work with the original wound, which is where it first came from, how we get caught in these relationships, the beliefs we hold about ourselves, and they sort of all mingle in then.
Yeah. So what kind of, can you share a couple of the modalities that you use?
I mean, yeah, I learned, I suppose in a way the nearest would be like a timeline therapy. I work with the original wound. So the original wound is that point that it started. So it might be a child witnesses something, or they hear something, and so I work backwards. So somebody might come to me, and they're experiencing a lot of pain and confusion around what's going on in their life, and working with the pain within the body and where it's held, we then track it back to where that originally came from. Now, people might have a few of these, so as many as we can, I would clear in one session. That's the original wound. I work with WoundTalking, which is actually communicating and finding out what actually the body wants. And that I also call I train as honest conversations. So, and that actually came from a bout of rumination that I was experiencing, and I hadn't seen at this point he was still my estranged husband, for about 2 years. And because these divorces also go on a long time, so I hadn't seen him for about 2 years, and there was something had happened, and I can't remember, it was an email, it was something that happened, and then all of a sudden there was something inside me that needed him. I didn't understand why. So what I talk and take people through is finding out what it is, what actually I needed at the time. And it was actually a child. So I was then working with an inner child that needed comfort, that needed she needed I suppose she just needed reassurance that everything was going to be okay and that she was okay. And so I work in that with that modality as well. I also work with the quantum, and I also work with past life, because I trained as a past life energetics healer. So I work with past life trauma, and I also work with ancestral trauma. So this is the repeats of relationships that come through the lines.
The life repeating patterns.
Absolutely. And my mantra is, it stops here and it stops now and it stops with us, because we are at this point that we can say, no, this is done. This is where it stops.
Yeah, because there's so many people that I come in contact with who are living their life now, but are stuck in the emotions of what happened in the past. Now, that past might be a year ago, it might be 10 years ago, it might be 20 years ago, it might be childhood, but they're trying to live a life now with those emotions. And it's getting them to understand that those emotions that they're living with now don't actually belong here anymore. And that's when you say it has to stop here now.
Yeah. And for me, it's about those repeating patterns that they might have seen a family member, or the trauma is being passed down. That can be money trauma. It could be something that somebody's witnessed and stopped somebody happening. I mean, I can go back to things that have happened in my timeline, with my grandparents, and what my grandmother experienced and what her mother experienced, and how those limitations and people get scared, and people don't do that because and then put limitations on things that are completely unrealistic in today's day and age. It is. And it's, so these things happen to us. So our first 7 to 8 years of life are crucial.
Absolutely.
And everything, absolutely. So we live in this theta state. Everything we hear and we see, we take on as the truth. We believe the caregivers are there looking after us. If they're damaged, then they're passing on that damage, or they're not parenting. They might be distracted. They might, whatever it is, not present. So a lot of this healing comes being seen and heard, and that's a lot of the work that I do. And it turns into a lot of reparenting work. So it's all bundled into one package. So we clear the original wound where it came from, we reparent, and the child gets to parent themselves and gets to say during that session, tell that child what it needed at that moment in time. And it's so powerful, powerful.
We do work with similar lines, but I use different modalities. But we do work on very similar things. Definitely.
So I've gone through, I started way back in, I can't even think, 98 I think it was, with body, with Reiki and body, but I just got drawn into this because you can't tap these things out. They're so deep rooted, and if you leave anything behind, it's not for me, this is my belief, that you can tap something, it's still there. It's like leaving a thorn in your finger, and you're getting some of it out, and a little tiny bit, it's still sitting there. And I describe it as a verruca, but somebody was appalled by that description the other day at a breakfast meeting. And I said, it's like a verruca. If you leave a little tiny bit of that virus dormant in your body, it will, in the right conditions, it will trigger again.
And that's where the repeating life patterns come from, isn't it? Because you need to deal with everything.
Absolutely.
And if something is recurring, you have to say, right, why is this still happening when it's so many years down the line? And you think, well, let's look at what was going on then, and have you actually addressed everything? Have you worked through everything so that you can move forward
I mean,
from it
that's
and not bring it
crucial.
with you.
What is the trigger today? Yeah, it's what happened that triggered. Where are you today? You know, what was the trigger of this? And it's just like that virus sitting laying dormant. Something triggers it, and that wound is awake again.
Yeah, definitely. So Elizabeth, I was just wondering, what is it that you hope to get out of doing the talk in the festival?
That's a really good question. I'm on a mission. I talk about this quite a lot. I seem to be, and I've been shoved into this area, and I have no idea. Wounds are a passion of mine, and it's not like you go to school and say, you know, to the career specialist or advisor. I think when I was at school, and maybe there's similar options to you, were like nursing, secretarial, you know, that those are the careers. It's not like it is now. So I never went into school and went, oh, I really want to help people heal their wounds, but I've been pushed into that area. And when I look back, it was possibly something that I would go into, but I do seem to be on a bit of a mission. I want people to know they're not alone. I want people to realize that you can heal from this, and this isn't a trap. You know, there is a way out. So whether that's working with me, whether that's working with someone like you, whether that's working with somebody else, I think it's that awareness coming out of particularly emotionally abusive relationships. You feel like you're on your own, and part of that is through the isolation that people have been through. Part of that is through the self-isolation, because in a way, deep down, their subconscious knows it's not a good fit, but fear keeps them in a relationship for whatever reason. So, you know, we might make decisions that maybe in a different time or a different timeline with different wounds we wouldn't make. So I think that's really what I want, you know, to help people understand that, you know, there is an exit route. And I use the analogy of Ikea, because when you go up whichever Ikea you go to, one of the ones I go to is you go up the escalator, and if you turn right, you can get straight into the whatever the warehouse bit. Do you know the marketplace?
Yes. Yeah,
you don't have to go through it. And I've got that exit route. I got that way through. You're not having to go through every single, you know, bedroom and what have you. I don't want people. It makes my jaw drop that people have been in therapy for like 20 years. And I'm like, why are you still doing this? You know, you could have lived a life in 20 years. That's really what I hope to get. You know, to even if it's a little ripple that goes out a little bit further than I'm getting it going at the moment.
Yeah, I love that analogy. What a brilliant analogy. And you know, you being here was meant to be. You know, you're here and you are spreading the word about who, you know, the wounds can be healed and there is an exit. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. And
thank you for creating the space.
Oh, you're more than welcome. It's been lovely to chat with you and to get to know you better.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
As I said to Debbie, I do have the strategy to get to the marketplace, just like Ikea. I can show you that. I can share that with you. Reach out to me if you'd like to find out more. And as always, I'm sending you loads and loads of love until next time.